One of the models at that time counseled a different view, and that model was the so-called Tuskegee idea, headed by a man named Booker T. Washington, who was a little bit older than W.E.B. Du Bois, but had become very prominent, very influential figure, the most well-known African-American in the whole country in this period, much more so than Du Bois in this period. And he counseled in a very famous speech in Atlanta, Georgia, that blacks didn't need political rights. Blacks didn't need political, or what the term of that day, social equality with whites. That all we needed was economic opportunity. That if you enable blacks to have jobs, and that we would grow and we would develop within a segregated America, and prove ourselves at some point in the future whereby whites would then voluntarily let us in on an equal basis to their movie theaters. They would let us ride the Jim Crow, they would end Jim Crow seating and let us ride in the cars, or these things would change over time. And that we shouldn't try to force them, or we shouldn't try to push the issue, and instead just take jobs and develop ourselves economically in a way that proves ourselves vital and valuable to the United States of America, to the general population, and that over time we'd be accepted as regular citizens. And this counsel from Washington was very much embraced in that day by the politicians, by the corporate leaders, and was pushed throughout the mainstream of American society. And one of the individuals that stepped up to criticize this very effectively was W.E.B. Du Bois, in a book that we have the papers right here on, called The Souls of Black Folk. The Souls of Black Folk, which appeared in 1903, was Du Bois's thoughts on a whole range of issues, but the third chapter is the most important of what I'm talking about here in terms of the rise of the Niagara movement, and that was the chapter of Booker T. Washington and others, of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others. And in this chapter, Du Bois is the first to sort of openly and publicly criticize Booker T. Washington and his social philosophy, his political philosophy that Washington referred to as constructionism, but critics referred to as Uncle Tomism, as selling out the race, as later some would call it accommodationism. Let us accommodate white prejudice, white racism, in exchange for economic opportunity, and over the long haul, eventually that prejudice, that racism will lessen because they'll see us as economically valuable to America, and that prejudice will abate. And so he openly criticizes that philosophy in this chapter of his book, Souls of Black Folk, that appears in 1903, and that became the kind of helped to spark the momentum and a kind of a rallying cry toward a national movement that becomes the Niagara movement.